In this section, we will be discussing about risk assessment in a great detail. Here, I have tried a little bit different approach. Here, I will discuss with you a actual risk assessment template that we use for our organization AMLCFT risk assessment. In this template, I will discuss with you all the methodology, techniques, as well as quantitative data that you can use for your organization AMLCFT risk assessment. You may have heard about AMLCFT risk assessment. Even FATF first recommendation is about AMLCFT risk assessment. But you may not be aware about how actual risk assessment is performed in the organization. Even most of question from my students is about AMLCFT risk assessment. So my aim here is that by the end of this course you will have a pretty good knowledge and skill of how to perform AMLCFT risk assessment by yourself in your organization. The quote given by John Haywood, "Look before you leap," summarizes risk assessment. We have been hearing this quote time and again, but we keep forgetting it repeatedly and suffering consequences. For example, organization drafting policies before doing AMLCFT risk assessment is same as driving in the dark being blindfolded. Risk assessment is not exactly a science. It is kind of art because it differs from one organization to another. What follows in this section is an example of AMLCFT risk assessment which is based on my experience and knowledge as well as from the guidelines of Ulsberg, FATF and other related journals, white papers, articles and so on. If you have different opinion than mine or would like to share or add something, then please do share this in our Facebook community. If you are still not part of this community, then please do join, as vast knowledge and experience of various AML/CFT experts, risk management professional awaits you. Now I will explain you the risk assessment by showing you the exact report which I have prepared for a certain client. Also, I have changed some figures and removed any confidential details. Let me walk you through the actual AML/CFT risk assessment report. The first section can be your company profile. It can include when your company was established, what is its customer base, what type of services and products is provided through that company to its customers, um, list of branches and so on. And this is important, purpose of risk assessment. Whenever you are preparing this type of report, you need to mention what is the purpose for which the report is being prepared. So for this report, objective is to identify risk exposed area, effectiveness of control measure to mitigate identify risk and thus introduce further risk mitigation plans for future. Source of law. This is an important section. If there are regulatory requirement or policy and procedure guiding for the formulation of AML/CFT risk assessment, then you need to mention that also. For example, in Nepal, Central Bank Unified Directives number 19 states that every banks should perform AML/CFT risk assessment after the completion of fiscal year and it should be submitted within 3 months after the end of the fiscal year. Global indicators. While talking about this, I remember one incident. where I had a strong debate with this trainer. He said that you need to focus AML safety in your organization with isolation from other areas, meaning that you don't need to care about what things will is happening in the country or in government. You just focus AML safety inside your organization. To me, that is a very wrong notion. For example, let's say Transparency International report says that my country is very corrupted. Okay, so there is a very huge instances of corruption and bribery in government sector. So as a AMLCFT professional, it should concern me because there is high chances that PEP will utilize my bank to channel their ill-gotten funds. This is from wider perspective. Let's look this from a narrower perspective also. Let's say if your organization is in a dire situation and it needs huge growth rate to survive. Now, as a AMS safety or compliance said, it should concern you because increase in business also means increase in AML safety risk. So there is high chances that business person will override AML safety controls for the sake of profitability, which is unacceptable as it might increase your regulatory as well as legal risk. So to summarize, we need to look at national and international indicators. For that you can take GDP, GNI statistics, corruption index as well as other indicators. Analysis of National Risk Assessment Report. You need to, this is must. Okay, you need to always base your AML safety risk assessment on National Risk Assessment Report. National Risk Assessment is a process undertaken by countries to identify and assess the money laundering and terrorism financing risk that country face. National Risk Assessment Report help countries to understand their specific money laundering and terrorism financing threats, vulnerabilities and potential impacts. It involves analyzing the various sectors, entities and activities that could be exploited for illicit purposes. National Risk Assessment Report usually cover areas such as financial institution, non-financial business and other professions such as designated non-financial business and profession, which includes sectors like casinos, real estate, lawyers and so on. This report aims to provide an evidence-based assessment of money laundering and terrorism financing risk faced by a country, allowing policymakers and authorities to prioritize their resources, develop effective AML safety strategy, and allocate preventive measures accordingly. The assessment may involve collecting data, conducting surveys, and engaging with relevant stakeholders. While we are at it, it is very important to note that national risk assessment is different from mutual evaluation process, but they are somewhat interconnected. National risk assessment provides valuable input for mutual evaluation as it helps to identify and understand a country's money laundering and terrorism financing risk. And mutual evaluation then measures effectiveness of countries' AML safety measures. So after this, we'll so there is a section of impact of COVID-19 on money laundering and terrorism financing. So these are the extra content that you may or you may not include in your report. So these are the predicate offense listed by our Anti-Money Laundering Act. Now the basis of risk assessment. So as I told you earlier, this risk assessment is heavily based on Wolfsburg guideline. Let me show you that. So this is a Wolfsburg risk assessment frequently asked question. So if you this is a must important document for AMLCFT risk assessment, and if you go through this document, okay, it talks about different risk factors, control and calculation of residual risk. So according to this document, so there are actually four risk factors, and you can include other risk factor depending upon your organization. And the very the good thing about this guideline is that it shows the calculation process, okay, how you need to calculate inherent risk ratings. uh, then it also includes calculation of inherent risk for different risk factors and so on. So yeah, it talks about the calculation of residual risk also. So everything is clearly mentioned in this document also. So you can customize your risk assessment on the basis of this document. So this guideline is very useful for you. So I suggest that you go through this document before preparing your risk assessment.